Odd Conduit Media.
The Sandman Unlocked.
Hello, dreamers, and welcome to another episode of The Sandman Unlocked. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sean, and I'm thrilled you're joining us for our breakdown of The Sandman Episode 8, Playing House. I'm joined by two secret brides of the faceless slaves of the Forbidden House of the Nameless Knight of the Castle of Dread Desire, Ben.
I didn't know that about myself, but hello.
And Ashley.
Well, now we do. So welcome. On each TV deep dive, we'll be working our way through 4 sections. First, we'll summarize that week's episode and provide our hot takes. Then, we'll get into our scene-by-scene breakdown. Afterwards, we wrap up and offer our final thoughts.
And we are joined today by Beks. Beks is from Northern Virginia, is an avid listener of the 70mm podcast, which is where we met, and now is a voracious listener to the Sandman Unlocked. While she has no podcast of her own, she loves frequenting on other people's, therefore avoiding any real work. Beks, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you guys so much for having me and enabling my condition of not doing any of my own work and just hopping on people's podcasts. It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like every podcast just craves guests. They're just like, any guest, please bring the guest.
That makes me feel good that I'm not really wanted. It's just that I can talk a lot, so I get it. I'm a good filler. I could filibuster any day. It's fine.
I love it. I love it. And so what, if any, is your background with the Sandman?
My background with the Sandman is that my good friend KK tagged me in a post where he said, Becca, you need to watch this show. Look at this tall, sad emo boy. And so then I started watching it on Netflix, the TV show, and then I quickly just fell in love with it. I really, really enjoy fantasy, and I definitely want to read the books now, but I have not. So I'm just going off my knowledge of the TV show.
Ooh, that's great. That's a fun perspective to come from, like someone who's just seen the show and doesn't have the comic book background. I always think it's really cool to hear people like that perspective. So glad you're here.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
All right, introductions are done, so let's get to the episode. Sean, over to you for the summary.
Okay, so this was another packed episode as we follow the separate but quickly converging stories of Rose, her brother Jed, her friend Lyda, and the Corinthian. In the dreaming, we pick up where we left off last episode, with Rose dropping by Dream's palace for a chat. Morpheus explains to Rose that she's a dream vortex with a mysterious power that will allow her to travel through others' dreams and, hopefully, track down her missing brother. He advises Rose to continue searching for her brother both in the waking world with Matthew's help and in dreams with his own. The Dream King isn't helping Rose because he's a stand-up guy, though. He really just wants to track down the missing dreams and nightmares from his realm. Speaking of which, we finally meet the mysterious Galt, a shape-shifting nightmare who's taken up residence in Jed's mind and severed him from the dreaming. Taking the shape of Rose and Jed's mother, Galt helps Jed dream of a life where he's a daring superhero, the Sandman, instead of an orphan living with abusive foster parents. Meanwhile, the Corinthian is slowly closing in on Rose, having tracked down Unity Kincaid, Rose's great-grandmother, in England. He then follows her to Florida, where he finds Rose, unbeknownst to her, speaking with Matthew the Raven, while putting up flyers for Jed. The block is hot, as they say, so the Corinthian switches tactics and focuses on finding little Jed instead, presumably hoping to lure Rose to him. That night, Rose travels freely through the dreams of her housemates in a really cool sequence as she searches for a path to her brother. With Morpheus' help, she eventually tracks down Jed, but before he can tell her where he is, Morpheus dickishly ends the dream because he's found Galt, which is all he really wanted out of this whole thing anyway. Rose, however, picks up enough clues to find Barnaby and Clarice's house, but she's beaten to the punch by the Corinthian, who takes out the wicked foster parents off screen and absconds with little Jed in a really cool convertible. Oh, also, Lyta gets dream pregnant by her ghost husband in a dream house straight out of Grand Designs, but I couldn't figure out how to work that into my summary organically.
I also was trying to figure out how to put that into my scene-by-scene breakdown, and you will see me stumble with that later on in this episode.
Same page.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah. Thank you, Sean, so much for that. So our first order of business is to do our hot takes. Beks, we always let guests go first, so that way we can't steal any of yours. What is your hot take from this week's episode?
I have two. I don't think the first one is that much of a hot take because Sean pretty much said it in that lovely summary. But the Sandman is really pissy in this episode, and he needs to get over his little sad boy routine. I think he's pushing that envelope a little too hard, especially with Rose. I just don't think that's fair. So that's my first one. Again, probably not actually a hot take. And then my other hot take is I love the subject of grief that's in this episode, and I like the different ways it's kind of like interwoven in different aspects of this, whether it's moving somewhere or losing someone or wanting to go back to a place or a time. I think that was really, really it was cool to see how that subject took different shades and colors, I think, in this episode.
Thanks, Beks.
Those are my main ones.
Ashley, how about you?
My first hot take is Uncle Barnaby just omniscient or something? Because how could he possibly have noticed that Jed put that note in that woman's purse?
I thought it was Clarice. Who saw the note go in and she sold him out.
Oh, that's snitch.
Because she kind of glances over.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Dang it. Okay. That clarifies that, but also still pisses me off. Yep. And then my second hot take is something I've been repeating the entire season. The Corinthian's hot. Like, that's just, hot. I mean, I hate this. I hate this about myself, but like the charm.
That coat.
Yeah, seriously. And actually said that when they were at the beach. I was like, who wears a coat at the beach? But he's pulling it off.
And I just love how everybody looks at him as he walks by.
Yes.
Everyone.
I
Doesn't
know.
matter. Age, sexuality, race, doesn't matter. Everybody checks him out. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Sean, how about you?
Okay, well, R.I.P. Clarice and Barnaby. Good riddance, and don't let the door hit you on the way out. I've honestly never been so happy to have two people murdered by a gruesome eyeball-eating monster before. They were bad, and we want Jed to be free of them, but we haven't. This is the Sean take where I criticize stuff. We haven't seen such kind of flat and one-dimensional characterization since Roderick Burgess in episode 1. So I feel like I've been released from the basement dungeon of lazy storytelling there. Speaking of which, it is kind of interesting to me that both Burgess and Barnaby had a Sandman locked up in their basement. Both were cruel and greedy. Both were aided by people who didn't seem so much evil as they were just sort of following orders. Yes. Both were visited by the Corinthian, and both met violent ends.
Wow. Hey. Sean.
Deep.
Amazing.
I mean, I don't think those parallels were ever really explored in the comic, so I wonder if it's just me reading too much into it, or if the show will have the two Sandmen meet up again and be like, oh man, you got locked in the basement too. Overall though, I liked how weird this episode got at times, especially the dream sequence with Rose's roommates, Barbie's magical quest, Chantal's relationship with the sentence, Hal tearing his face off. This is the Neil Gaiman special technique if you're a character in a fighting game or something, where he just hits you with this rapid fire combo of far out story ideas that may come up again or may just leave you wondering about them forever. He does this several times in the comic, and it's great to see it coming out in the show as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Sean. For my hot take, I was, like Sean, enthralled by the dream sequence with Rose Walker moving through the housemate's dream. And I literally cheered with excitement when we saw Barbie and Martin Tenbones.
Yes!
And I'm not sure what they're going to do. I don't know, but they put it in there, and that was just so exciting to see as a comic book reader, to see that those two characters introduced in that way was really exciting, really exciting. So that's my hot take for today. Let's slide over to the scene-by-scene breakdown. In our first scene, Rose Walker is in the dreaming, talking to Morpheus. He asks her to keep looking for Jed in the waking world, and then he will join her when she falls asleep to continue the search. We are then introduced to Galt, who is sending Jed as the Sandman into an alternate dreaming to fight bad guys. Sadly, Jed wakes up from the dream after being overrun by rats to an actual rat biting his finger. Ashley, let's start with you with this first scene.
Oh goodness. I really like when anybody challenges Dream to be somebody other than he is. So when Rose is, demanding information, I think that's a really ballsy but also indicative move of Rose's character and strength. So I really appreciate her engagement with him. But just quickly going over to Jed, this was heartbreaking. I was really enchanted by, I can't remember the actor's name that's playing Jed, but his ability to transition between very real, dramatic scenes to this kind of sort of hokey, pseudo-comic book presentation of a children's show. Just even the way he was posturing himself, the way he's looking around, like, I see the bad, everything about it was just, it's hard for especially child actors, I think, to develop that sense of nuance of like, this is a game that we're playing in this case, whereas the other scenes you're in real serious danger. So his ability to flip that, I think, was really well executed. I love the costuming in that street scene in his like little hero getup, and just the way he and Galt, I mean, he doesn't know what Galt is ultimately, but the way that Galt is attempting to serve him. And we've had that episode where Death was trying to explain to Morpheus, we serve humanity in this way. We should be serving humanity. So Galt representing that well and doing that job well in this case, I thought was really compelling. And clearly not power hungry like the other nightmare is, the Corinthian, but just really is concerned about this kid in their own way. So I really enjoyed that team up.
And Jed is played by Eddie Conraha.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Beks, I saw you nodding vigorously as Ashley was saying.
Well, I'm a very responsive listener, so sorry. I know people can't see that, but y'all can. Yeah, Ashley, I think you said it perfectly. Jed, I love the way that he dreams and how, like you said, how it's that kind of kid TV show. I almost feel like I think it really hits home on like when a child is experiencing trauma, they tend to regress. So he has to face this horrible reality when he's awake, so he can just be really safe and be a kid and get to live that kid life he probably didn't get to in his dreams. So I really, really loved that. And I guess like I just from your guys' perspectives, I had a question about for Galt and that dream ending with the rat. I know there was a rat on him in real life, but is it that she can't actually make dreams and she can only make nightmares? Or like, did he have other dreams that weren't like that ended well? Like, I'm wondering if it always kind of ended sour for him, or if he actually had like successful, happy dreams sometimes.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about the psychology of dreaming. I feel like this is where knowing psychologists would be really helpful as far as how reality ekes out into your dreaming world. But I had just kind of taken it as his external stimuli were breaking in. I'm realizing very protective of Galt. So I was just like, it's not Galt's fault. Galt's doing their best. But
I love Galt too. Just for the record, I'm not attacking
oh no, I
them.
didn't think you were. I'm just trying to. I just realized I'm like, why do I suddenly feel so defensive? Sean, do you know anything?
Some things every once in a while. Yes. No. Yeah. So I also kind of assumed that. After watching the episode through, so at the initial point, we don't really know the extent of control that Galt exercises over this dream world, right? Like, from the beginning of that episode, it could very well be that she has like sent these rats to terrorize Jed. We're sort of conditioned to think this might be possible from the previous episode where Morpheus said, this is a nightmare, it's a shapeshifter, not meant to be trusted, like laid that out there, right? And then you have that additional layer, if you're familiar with the comics, the equivalent to Galt, the comics equivalent to Galt, were actually two separate beings, Brute and Glob. And there were two nightmare creatures, and then they kind of made a portmanteau to create Galt. But these creatures were just there because they wanted to set themselves up as rulers of their own dream world. So for familiar viewers, we're expecting something similar like that. And so we're expecting like maybe these are like, this is just like her sort of just like messing with this kid. Whereas in retrospect now, I'm sort of thinking that, she's controlling a dream world that exists entirely for Jed, and her control is not absolute. Like, she's not Morpheus, right? Like, she's an amateur at this for the most part. So that leads me to believe it was like Ashley said, that it's this external stimuli that's breaking through. Like, you can only cover up that harsh reality with this more ideal dream, so much, right? But it'll eventually come through.
Yeah, and one thing, if you kind of watch the actress who is portraying Galt's Anne Agbomo, you can see, like, she feels very concerned when the rats start showing up, and it looks like legitimate concern, and it's would kind of be a lot to like be like, oh, I'm being ashamed. Like, I mean, in that moment, nobody is watching her, so there would be no reason for her to fake being concerned because no one is watching her. Point. And so in that case, she seems legitimately concerned that he is, and I think what she knows, because it seems like she's been doing this for 6 years, is that she knows that there is some external stimuli that is going to invade into the dream space and cause distress to Jed, who she is trying to cause to not be in distress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I and looking back, like rewatching it after I, we had a better sense of her character from watching it through, there's like this really like when Jed does his Sandman thing and is going to find the Pied Piper.
He looks so cool doing the Sandman thing.
He really does.
He did. He looks
He's
so cool.
Cute. Yeah.
He's walking down the street towards like that sewer, and there's like this really maternal sort of smile that she gives before she turns a dial for like the Pied Piper like flute music to start. I just thought that in retrospect, I thought that was very sweet. Like, she was getting such enjoyment from like his enjoyment. Speaking of Pied Piper, can I just say how much comic nerd like me appreciated all of the comic book references in this scene? Of course, there's Jed's costume is the costume of the 1970s Sandman, the version created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And then the villains also that they mention, his like rogues gallery, are all comic book like DC villains. Like, on the monitor, you see images of like Captain Cold and I think the Mirror Master. And then he mentions like Dr. Death, Johnny Sorrow, and the Phantom of the Fair, which are all really badass names, I have to say. Like, those are cool villain names, but those are actually comic book villains, most of whom interacted with the 1940s gas mask wearing Sandman character. So I appreciate those like little nods to comic book history.
That's
Very
awesome.
Cool. Very cool. All right, let's take a look at our next scene. Rose wakes up and continues the search for Jed after calling Unity, who was being visited by the Corinthian. Rose enlists the others in the house to help hang posters for Jed, but Lyda is still sleeping. She is in a dream with her dead husband, visiting a house he built for her in his dream. Sean, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Okay. So first thing I wanted to say was just that I really appreciate the little character moments and interactions that ground us in a sense of reality, because so much ridiculous stuff is happening. So when there's something said that like feels like very like human and very contemporary, I always appreciate that. Case in point here, Hal being like, "Did you figure out the printer?" Because, as we know, that is the most frustrating and evil piece of technology in human existence. And so, like, him first checking in, like, "Did you figure out the printer?" This is just great. I appreciated that. The other thing I will say I want to call out about this scene was that I don't know what's happening with Hector and Lyda in their little, like, dream Grand Designs house, but it's weird, and I appreciate that. Like, I really appreciated, Hector being like, "If I were a dream, wouldn't I disappear when you wake up?" And she's asking, like, "Oh, you don't? Well, what do you do?" And he's like, "Well, I go to work, I cook, I work out, all these things." And that's so fascinating. Like, it just, like, makes your mind, it just, like, fires all of the, imagination cylinders that you have in there. And so I really thought that was cool, and it really made me intrigued to know what else is going on there.
Bex, how about you?
Yeah, I really like that scene with Lyda, and I like how she says, "Oh, well, I shouldn't be here with my ghost husband." And then, like you were saying, Sean, he's like, no, I'm here all the time. I really, and I think that kind of gives the question to Lyda, like, it plants that seed in her mind of, is this actually an option? Like, to spend more time with him here in this world than in what I know to be reality? Like, what are really what's really going on or at odds with what I want? Don't I want to be with my husband here? And isn't that worth the sacrifice? Can't I just stay in this past life that I never got to live? So I think that scene does a good job of planting that question in Lyda's brain.
Yeah, actually, this episode really, I feel like, is like the weirdest episode, and this is like the start of the weird. And was just wondering if you kind of felt the same way.
Yeah, I felt like this section in particular asked more questions than it answered, which I like to have all of my ducks in a row. So I'm like, hold up. One, he's got his own life in the dreaming. I mean, Morpheus, get it together. Everything's gone rogue. What is happening? Which is interesting, but now I'm just really curious as to when the other shoe's going to drop, because there's going to be some sort of tragic ending to this. Like, there's going to be some aspect of Lyda's dream husband is going to fall short, I anticipate, and there's going to be some sort of reality break, and it's going to be horrible, and I'm going to ugly cry again. And so I'm just not letting myself enjoy it. I'm like, no, this is awful. There's something nefarious about this. I'm just braced for disappointment.
I mean, he's good looking. He builds houses. He cooks breakfast.
I don't trust it.
Like,
I don't trust it. Somehow I trust Dream Husband less than I trust the Corinthian.
Well, yeah, we've talked about that in a prior episode, right? Because the Corinthian, he is like the super ego on steroids. Like, well, the super ego, it doesn't lie. It is itself, and it knows itself. Yeah.
We know what he's about. I don't know what this dead dream husband's about.
Yeah.
I like that question that Beks brought up is because it's like, that's a question that, that fiction, especially over the last 20, 25 years returns to over and over again. It's just like, if you have the option of having this ideal world that you know is not real, would you choose that over a potentially more bleak reality? Like, it's a cool step to take. I hope they explore Lyta's thinking with that, more as the series goes on, or in our last episode, I guess.
Yeah. And that was explored really nicely, right? Like in The Matrix, and with Johnny, Joey Pants, trying to get out, talking to Agent Smith. So
or all like cyberpunk, like where there's some sort of virtual reality world that's a part of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's look at our next scene. Rose and Hal go out to hand out posters. Lyta visits the foster agency and apologizes while also asking if the agency can check on Jed. Barnaby threatens Jed that if he misbehaves while the foster agency is there, he will, quote, break every bone in his body, end quotes. Back with Rose, she talks with Matthew while the Corinthian circles nearby. All right, Beks, you're up first.
Oh, man. The way I hate Uncle Barnaby. I one of the reasons I loved watching this episode is because I love how it focuses on, in this world, the foster care system and just wellness checks and all of those things. I think it was really interesting to see how they handled it. And I would break every bone in Barnaby's body if I even saw him. I love Jed so much. I would do anything for him. And Ashley, you said it earlier, I feel like in this episode, I'm not, or I can't remember who said it, but I'm not upset about what happens to these people. But I think it's interesting, right? Because you have Aunt Clarice and you can't really tell where she has defended Jed where she could and where she feels like she owes allegiance to Barnaby. And I think that's really interesting because it's kind of hard to tell where she's being controlled and abused by her husband and what she may or may not be responsible for when it comes to Jed. And I don't think, those are the answers I necessarily have, but I like that they explore that in this episode. And also, the whole foster agency storyline, I think, is just well done. And it's also it's sad to see Jed in this position. I get so mad when I think about Barnaby, though. I would do anything for Jed. He's so precious.
Ashley?
Yeah, shout out to Lyta for having a high charisma score and knowing that they kind of screwed that visit up and going back and trying to build some bridges.
She rolled well.
You know how she gets that?
She rolled very well.
Gets that? It's because she doesn't take... So she wakes up with her makeup on and her earrings and her necklace. And this is a power move. This is what a powerful individual does. Perfect hair, makeup, earrings, necklace, already as soon as she sits up,
Yeah, this is a woman that's never been told no, and she's not about to be told no now. But the fact that she goes in there and tries to clean up, I really appreciate it. That's like a true friend, making sure that the job gets done however it needs to get done, and having a frank conversation. And I can't imagine how thankless that job is anyway. So to have someone come in, I mean, you immediately see the social worker tense up because she's like, there's going to be another argument. So the fact that she's able to ease the social worker and have a conversation. Speaking of, just quickly, was the social worker drinking wine at lunch?
Yep.
That glass was confusing.
That glass was confusing. I don't think so.
I was going to ask the same question.
I was like,
is that white wine?
Right. I thought the same thing. I was like, wait, what kind of social worker are you?
That was the most unbelievable part of this whole episode was the fact that she was drinking some sort of liquid out of a glass cup.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. She was drinking it. Yeah. She was drinking it out of a red wine glass because it didn't have a stem. And I was just like, I have questions. Maybe I'm focusing too hard on the props right now, but this is a red flag for me.
I definitely saw it. It was like,
okay, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I extended grace. I was like, oh, someone just saw this, thought it was cool to put water in. Like that was I decided to go that direction with it.
But like I was
No, that
seriously,
was
I was leaning so hard into the screen going, that looks yellow. That looks yellow
Yeah.
to me. Yeah, so there's that
It's
question.
Florida. They probably privatized like the social services, and so this is probably a profit-oriented venture. And she is like, she's probably living pretty good.
Oh no. But I do appreciate that we got that moment. I thought that was necessary. And then Uncle Barnaby and that whole sort of dynamic. I do wonder if Clarice just, as you brought up, Bex, I really appreciate your insight on this, but the idea of Jed being there to kind of take the blows that maybe she was taking previous, because even the idea of, and we're going to get to that scene later, but the idea of her stitching on Jed so he can't go makes me wonder what was going on prior to them having any kid in the house. Not that justifies it at all, but just that whole triangulation dynamic is really horrifying. And I think that they demonstrate the horror well in ways that I wish that they would demonstrate the horror of other realistic situations better in other episodes. And so this, I feel like it's a really good balance of, this is horrific, but you don't need to see everything. So I thought that was really well balanced, as horrific as it is. And then, when Rose and Hal are on the beach talking, I just like their friendship. They're just, it's so comforting. You do really need like a comforting little friendship scene after all of the horrific. So just having them chat and her talking about her family and everything is just really charming. I enjoy that. I was also very proud of myself that I know the difference between a crow and a raven, because when she's like, that's Matthew? And I was like, no, that's a crow. And then when she runs up to the crow and is like, Matthew? And he's like, no, that's a crow. I'm a raven. I'm like, told you.
You gotta know your corvids.
You really do need to know your corvids.
I'm still not convinced that there's a difference. I read the articles. I work with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I've looked at their own writing on this stuff, and I still can't tell the difference. I feel like everyone's just trying to trick me.
Well, then you're about to get really screwed up, because blue jays also corvids.
Son of a... Okay.
No, but you can tell the difference because those ones are blue, Sean, so you're good.
Yeah, those are blue.
You know
All
those
right,
ones. Those are the
thank you,
blue
Ben.
ones. Those are the blue ones. Sean, take us back where Ashley was going. Take us back to the beach and talk to us about, the Corinthian showing up and, his mesmerizing walk across the sand in that jacket.
Gosh, so
All right,
attractive.
thanks for refocusing me, Ben.
I think that's my job. I think that's it says Ben, host, producer, so I'm good. I got it.
I thought there was some great dialogue in those scenes. Like, I really loved Matthew being like, no, that's a crow. That was great, as you noted. I also really loved, I'm also really fond of Hal and Rose's friendship, and just Hal as a character generally. Like, it's just so, like, fun to watch, I particularly liked his line asking if Rose's father had any friends, like golf buddies, drinking buddies. What else do straight men with kids do? Like, it was just, wonderfully delivered there. And then, I also thought, like, I also appreciated, like, the little weird elements, like Ms. Rubio drinking wine at lunch. I kind of appreciated...
Potentially.
Genuinely, though, yeah. 100% though. I appreciate it because it's like, it would be so easy to cast the role of social worker as like this, Dickensian sort of heartless person, right?
Sure,
and the show clearly doesn't want to do that, because it does. I think the show is like recognizing like what a thankless job this is. Like, honestly, this person probably like has a master's and is like making far beneath what she'd need to pay off her student loan payments and things like that.
Yeah.
So I appreciated their effort at giving her some dimension and some, some thoughtfulness and some consideration of like her responsibility to these things. Barnaby and Clarice, I don't have much to say about it. I do think it's creepy that Barnaby does not blink ever. If you notice, he
yeah.
doesn't blink
Reptilian.
anytime he's on camera, not once. So that is appropriately creepy. Also, did you happen to notice that their kitchen table is coffin shaped? It's a pentagon. Isn't that weird?
I thought that was really weird.
What a strange design
I kind of liked their
choice.
table. I like noted that. I was like, oh, that's fun. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of coffin-like.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Do you guys hear that? That whistling? Should we go check it out? Let's go check it out. We'll be right back. All right, in the back half of the episode now, Jed tries to pass a note along to the foster agency rep Eleanor, but Barnaby and Clarice end up finding it. When she is back in her office, Eleanor is killed unceremoniously and off-screen by the Corinthian. He finds out where Jed is and heads there. Hal and Rose return home to a quiet house, and he tells her to pursue her dreams now. Ashley, what do you want to pull out of this one first?
And there's like so much to unpack here, but I do just want to circle specifically to the conversation between Hal and Rose, because I think the advice he gives her is just really solid advice. I really appreciate his honesty in this moment of like, I like these people, but if I got my shot, I'd be taking it. I'm not going to sacrifice everything that I've kind of worked for just to keep this house open and live here and kind of be dead-ended by this life. I would try to make it. And I think the fact that he can be that honest with her and that upfront really says a lot about who he is as a person, or they are as a person, and how Rose is as a person. And again, it helps sort of establish that friendship that they have in a way that doesn't feel clunky. I feel like sometimes there are some forced relationships that I'm just like, I just don't think those two people would have connected in the way that they did. To the point where this relationship between Hal and Rose feels more believable to me than her friendship with Lyta. I still have a hard time believing that friendship, but this one between her and Hal, I think, is really lovely. And the fact that he's just that frank is at first a little sort of, it caught me on the back foot, but then I was like, no, that's solid. He's trying to protect her. He sees that she is capable of far more than just staying put and writing about other people, that she has a whole life ahead of her.
Yeah, and it's almost like, it seems like Lyta and Rose's friendship is all about big moments, like when they were there for each other.
Yes.
And that's a different kind of friendship.
Sure.
That
That's a
can
good point.
be very different than one that is more, Hal and Rose have a different level of intimacy based off like what they're doing.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Like, when you're there and you're like the other person's like grief connector, that just is gonna, and it feels weird. Like their relationship sometimes feels distant and feels cold, but it's always like protective in some kind of way. That
Yes.
I think probably came out of that experience with each other.
Absolutely. As a millennial, I love me some trauma bonding, but I agree with your observation that it could be the differential between the relationships. That's a really good highlight.
Yeah, Bex, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, no. I love this scene too, and I thought Hal feels like a friend. Like when I'm watching it, I feel like he's a friend to me.
Yeah.
So everything he says feels very friend-like. A friend is going to say things that maybe you don't want to hear, but they're going to say it because they love you. And I really liked how he talked about coming home to Florida, and now here's Rose, and she's trying to figure out what's next about if this is home. Like, is this me coming home? Is this what I should be doing? I think Lyta has to ask herself that question in this episode too, in a different way of like with being with her husband in the dream. Like, can I come home? And Hal rightly says, this wasn't my dream. Coming back to Florida wasn't my dream. You don't have to have this reality. You need to pursue your actual dream, which is writing. So I liked the kind of connected flow, especially like as the episode goes on, and I think Morpheus mentions home later in the episode. I really liked that connection. I thought it was a cool scene between them, and I really like how he just feels like he feels like someone I know or someone that we all have in our life. And Ashley, you said it, like Lyda and Rose are definitely trauma bonded, which is a good thing. Like, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
They have each other for that purpose. They can connect on that level. So their friendships are very different, but I appreciate that, especially as Rose being at least looking a lot younger than both of those people. I really like the age difference in her friendships as well.
Yeah, Sean, where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, well, I think you're spot on that sort of the theme of this episode is home, like the theme of the previous episode was family. The nice thing is that something as broad as home is a very sort of amorphous idea, right? Like, for some people, it's a place of, comfort and safety and protection, and so for some people, it's a way of, avoiding the real world or not having to, a sort of protection to the point of, to an almost detrimental point. And for some people, it's never that, really. Like, it's never quite achieves, what the idea of home should be. So the fact that this was the sort of central concept that's refracted in all these ways through the different characters and their relationships to each other was really interesting and a nice thing to see. Now, that aside, I also want to point out that the Corinthians knife holsters were really cool. He had those leather shoulder straps where he kept his knives. That was so badass. I mean,
he's a professional now.
Yeah. And I did like how I don't know if I even liked it, but the social worker, as soon as he walked in, she was like, "Oh, hi there."
Yep.
And
she cocked her head and was like, "Oh,
yeah."
Imagine how many hot people she gets to see though daily. Not that many.
Exactly.
Probably not. She's been waiting for that one. That one had been written in her dream journal at home. And now we know what the Corinthian does with those eyes, right? Because we get him.
Snack.
Yeah, we get those gross squelching sounds and the eyes on the table there with drops of blood dripping onto the papers. I appreciated that truly graphic and disgusting moment in this show.
I wonder why he took his glasses off before he ate the eyeballs, though. That was kind of weird, wasn't it?
Oh, that's a good question, Ben.
Beck, sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I interrupted you. I was just going to say I watched this episode with my headphones on, my Bluetooth headphones, and that squelching was top level, detailed, and I thought I was going to hurl. I was I'm not watching any more episodes with my headphones on.
Yeah, they really went hard for that Foley work.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at our next scene. Rose awakens in the dreaming and moves through her housemate's dreams, searching for Morpheus and Jed. She eventually finds Morpheus and the path that will find Jed and Galt. Jed comes out as the Sandman to fight Morpheus, but is stopped by Galt, who lets Jed know that Morpheus is there for her. Jed finally recognizes Rose, and they are reunited in the dreaming, but he is unable to tell her specifically where he is. Dream takes Galt back to the dreaming, and Rose wakes up. Ashley.
This was heartbreaking. I loved all the transitions between everyone's dreams. Just the stage setting for each one was so dynamic that I really enjoyed seeing that. And so much so, I was watching this with my husband, and he was just like, who are these people? Just because of how elaborate their dreams were, especially when it came to Barbie's. Really, frankly, Ken's was the most boring. I was like, oh no, you're naked. Like, that sucks for you, I guess. Conventionally attractive person.
Yeah,
but,
he doesn't seem like the kind of person that would be too upset about being naked, like in the street. Like,
right.
there are
Right.
people
I
who
feel like
would be really upset, and then there's the people who aren't upset. He feels like a person who wouldn't be upset.
right. Exactly. So
I mean, look at his hair. He wouldn't be like just based on
He's
his
like
hair
holding
color.
himself and everything. I'm like, I don't think that's what you'd be doing, buddy. Like,
right. Exactly. So I feel like the real fear in that nightmare is specifically Barbie holding all the cards and rejecting him in some way, as opposed to just like being vulnerable. I think it really, because we see that moment earlier when she says that they're going to take some posters to put up when they go to see their realtor, and he's like, babe. And she's like, what? We'll give some to our realtor too. So there's clearly some like tension between them in general. So I liked that was highlighted in his nightmare, but also like, boring. Let's skip ahead. Whereas everyone else's dreams were very interesting. Hal's horrifying, but in the best way possible. Zelda and Chantal, so weird. Loved that. Imagine having a relationship with a sentence. Just, chef's kiss. But then, yeah, when they finally find Jed, that exchange, I mean, I kind of anticipated Morpheus to be like, cool, got my nightmare, see ya. But just the way it was done and handled, I got so upset. I was so angry. Just absolutely furious at how, I mean, she's like, where are you going? I still need help. What do you mean you're leaving? And just how panicked Jed was. It was just heartbreaking. That was a heartbreaking departure.
Beks, was there a particular one of the dreams, nightmares that you really enjoyed?
I really liked Barbie's. Again, I think you guys referenced the creature she's with earlier. I have no idea who that is, but I was like, oh, so cute.
Yeah.
And I also really liked Zelda's dream in the graveyard. I thought that one was really, really interesting. I was curious, do you guys have really vivid dreams? Like, do you remember your dreams? Are they really odd?
I can go first and just say no, and then pass it along.
Sean, what about you?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because I have really vivid dreams, like nightly, and I remember most of them right when I wake up. So it felt comforting, I think, to see, with the exception of Ken, these kind of more outlandish dreams. It I don't know, it just like kind of gave me comfort. I really, really liked Zelda's, though. I think it just hit the creepiness, but also that's, I think, when Morpheus says, this is what feels like home to her line. And I just really loved that line a lot.
Yeah, my childhood was comprised of me sitting at the breakfast table while my younger brother, producer Patrick, would come down and spend, I don't know, anywhere from 7 to 12 minutes talking about all of his dreams that he had the previous night. He sat there and listened to all of them. I complain about this on other podcasts that we also host together. And this season we're playing a video game that's all about dreaming in our other podcasts. And so he's like, Ben, every introduction, I'm going to talk about dreams for a while, and you just have to sit there and be okay with it. So there you go. That's my life when it comes to dreaming.
You're a good brother.
Well, we try.
That's hard to do, especially with your sibling. Yeah.
So, Sean, anything that you wanted to yank out of this?
Well, I think my favorite was probably unsurprisingly for those of you who know how much I like sort of creepy, more horrific things, was Hal's scene. I thought that was so well done. It was just so disturbing and so well realized. That gruesome faceless visage saying, you're gonna have to help me, mama's running out of hands, right? Like, that was so terrifying and terrible, and something that I can imagine being the case for a performer, right? Like someone questioning, what is the real, who's the real them. And that was not something that was taken directly from the comic. It was it was changed, definitely. Like, it was changed significantly, and I think it was made more powerful for it, and a cooler scene because of the changes they made. So I want to, just give props to everyone involved in that, basically. I also really appreciated like the little details of the words and letters on signs being not clear, being like disarranged sort of. And I don't know whether it's true or not that you can't read in dreams. I think that's a thing that I learned from Batman,
Internet?
the animated series. When I was a little kid, because there's like an episode where Batman was he had this like ideal life as Bruce Wayne, and his parents were still alive and everything, but he like opens up a newspaper and their words are all scrambled, and that's how he like realizes he's in a dream, and it was like the Scarecrow or the Mad Hatter or something, one of those guys.
Dr. Destiny, maybe?
So yeah. No, unfortunately not. It was definitely a Scarecrow or Mad Hatter. But, I don't even know if that's real, but I thought it was a cool detail to add. And R.I.P. Kevin Conroy there. I also,
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, really loved also Barbie's scene. If things work out as we hope they do, then we'll be seeing more of her and her quest that she's on. And I think the actor who plays her does a great job and like makes me want to follow along in her quest. And of course, her big dog buddy Martin Tenbones, want to see more of him as well. So that was really cool. And then the final face-off between Dream and Galt was so sad there, where she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Sandman," to him and all that. It was such a surprise, just from my familiarity with the like original subject matter. It was such a nice change. I love when they take a character who is fairly, one-dimensional and give that person depth and, additional motivation and provoke our sympathies in interesting ways. And I think they really came through with that one here. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, I think that tees us up nicely here for our last scene. The Corinthian saves Jed. Notice the scare quotes. Lyda Hall gets pregnant in a dream, but also in real life. Rose figures out where Jed is and heads over there, but Jed isn't there anymore. Galt and Morpheus have a debate about choice in changing one nature until he sends her into the darkness for a few thousand years. Beks, you are up first.
Woo, buddy. I don't know where to begin with Lyda.
That was so weird. How do you talk about that?
Yeah, this is the weirdest episode. Like this episode is weird for sure.
Well, so it's like we know that Unity had a child, right? And watching episode 8 made me wonder if that's also how she was impregnated. Like, I don't know. So I was like hoping that maybe it was more of a better situation, I guess, for lack of a better term, for Unity than maybe I originally imagined for her. But I thought that was really interesting that whatever was happening to Lyda was powerful enough to change her waking world. That was really interesting, and I think it kind of goes into Morpheus's own struggle with control and power. There's just so much there. Like, it kind of makes my head spin a little bit. But now Lyda just has this whole other reality she has to I don't know. This is honestly a nightmare for me. Like, oh my gosh, no. She looks like she's 3 months pregnant, right?
Oh yeah.
No, it was horrifying. It was just truly like as soon as it happened, when she just kind of ballooned up, I was like, oh, absolutely not. I would hate that. I don't care how much I love Alan. I do not want it to happen like that. That's horrifying.
I've literally had dreams like that, so I think that was also terrifying.
Me too.
It was like Where you're like,
Really? Wow.
you just like look down and you're like 8 months pregnant.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's terrifying. Yeah, that's so
truly
it's like,
horrific.
ooh, yeah.
Maybe this is why I don't trust Dream Husband. I was like, you don't get to just. There needs to be a conversation first. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Like,
you're right, because it's kind of like manifested.
yeah, exactly. It's
they
so
were doing a
uncomfortable.
lot of dream reconnecting. Like
That is true.
seems to be the
true.
That's
majority
great. I'm
of their
sure
time spent together.
they probably weren't using a dream condom.
Probably not.
Just
Oh my
horrifying. No IUDs in the dream world.
No.
But yeah, just absolutely horrifying. And so then when she steps out of the bathroom, it's just like, I'd be freaking out way more than she is. I would hate this. How is she so chill?
Yep. Ashley, why don't you take us over with the Corinthian saving Jed?
Yeah.
How'd you feel
So
about that? Yeah.
when Jed comes out and sees the carnage, it didn't connect right away for me what had happened. Then I was like, oh wait. Because when they were first panning over everything, I was like, did Barnaby just like go off? Like I was honestly more terrified for Jed.
But did you see when he first heard Jed call for Rose, like before the Corinthian came to the door, like he wrapped the belt around his hand with the buckle out? That's so
Yes.
messed up. That's like not
Yeah.
even like, that's beyond abusive parent level. Like buckle out? That's crazy.
Yeah, no, he's, I mean, again, just highlighting how horrific and heinous a man he is. So it just really, they've done a very good job of making you celebrate the Corinthian's actions, which is another way in which he's like so very charming, and that's what makes him horrific, because he wins you over every time. But then, yeah, just kind of looking through all the wreckage and everything, I'm just like, I thought you were neater about your work than this, my guy. Like, what kind of fight did Barnaby put up? And honestly, I'm a little bit surprised. I guess, I mean, she's not exactly known for her bravery, but I am surprised that Clarice didn't like somehow just sprint out and we didn't see her like try to make a break for it. But even in the moment, it was weird to have the Corinthian as sort of a moment of relief, because again, we know what we're dealing with when it's the Corinthian. So then when Jed's like looking around and neither Barnaby nor Clarice are around, and then the Corinthian steps out, I was like, oh, okay, it's just the Corinthian, which is so twisted. So I do kind of find it funny now when they're like speeding off in the Corinthian's convertible, and Jed just looks like he's at peace for the first time. The Nightmare, the big bad wolf car. The fact that Jed looks at peace for the first time in ages is just, it's heartbreaking, because he just doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Sure. Well, I mean, in his mind, probably anything is better than where he was, which is probably accurate.
Yeah.
Being with the Corinthian is actually probably better for him than being where he was.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Because at the end of the day, if the Corinthian were to decide to kill him, it doesn't seem like he doesn't like toy with his victims. He just kills them and they're dead, right? And so
I mean, well, I don't know. We've seen some of those relationships he's had where he's clearly, I mean, maybe he doesn't like go through torture, but he does lull them into a false sense of security, which could feel probably like betrayal for some of the guys that he's murdered.
Absolutely. All right, Sean. So Galt and Morpheus have quite a conversation, and I feel like this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I loved this. I loved this because it was such a change from the original series, as I mentioned, where the two missing nightmares were Brute and Glob, and they just wanted to set up their own sort of dominion to rule, where they could have their own dreaming they were in charge of. And the way this was changed, for one thing, you know, it plays with our empathy and our sense of who we, you know, feel sympathetic towards among the characters, but it's also a great way to reinforce the kind of overarching themes of the series and connect it to individual plot lines, right? Like this idea of Morpheus being locked into his sense of responsibility, his role, his duty. He is what he is, and that's kind of, all that he is. And this is coming up in the show in many more ways earlier and more frequently than it was in the comic. And it's one of the strongest thematic through lines of the comic. So I love to see this explored and reflected in different ways in the series itself. I also loved to see, Lucien, who's always willing to, kind of stand up to Dream and say what she thinks should be happening, but in particular to kind of take a stand here and say, that she didn't start out that way. She used to be something else before she was his librarian, which is both, brave of her, because Morpheus is scarier than we've ever seen him before, right? Galt says she's not afraid. Morpheus says you should be, and then he kind of uncreates her. Lucien still is willing to say that, I used to be something else. And then it also brings up the idea of, what was that? What was Lucien before she was Dream's librarian? Again, one of those moments that just, makes your imagination go. You just want to learn so much more. So I thought that was a really well-crafted scene. I thought the ideas that were in conflict were meaningful and important and well explored, and just A plus all around.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're going to go pop over into the graveyard and see what's going on over there, and we'll be right back. All right, well, thank you all for doing that scene-by-scene breakdown and letting us know how you were feeling, picking some nice things out. But here is your final thoughts. This is your last moment to make sure if there's something that we didn't talk about that you get a chance to lift it up so everyone gets a chance to hear about it. Beks, as our guest, we will start with you as always.
Thanks. I think, and Sean said it in the last scene with Galt and Morpheus, I like how Morpheus says, we don't choose to be created, but also at the same time, Lyta got pregnant in your dreamland, so IDK, maybe check on your realm. That baby also didn't choose to be created, but do you even know that it's being created? So I just really liked the kind of their conversation. That was really interesting, and how much he really is a lord in that sense. And I just think that's really fascinating to see that side of him. So I thought that was really cool. Not cool, cool to watch. I don't think it's cool that he's being all bossy.
Totally. Ashley?
Yeah, so two things. One, trackabeing.com is not a real website.
Oh, that was my final thought, too.
That was so funny. It was so funny.
I love fictional search engines.
Just so
there
great.
Should be
so good.
An archive of fictional search engines.
So
that's so disappointing, though. I wish it was real.
I know, it was the first thing I checked. As soon as it popped up, I was like, "Hold on." And then
is that domain available, or did it redirect somewhere?
No, I think it's available.
We should buy it, and then we could redirect people to our podcast.
There you go.
Oh
Smart.
my gosh!
See, this is the brain of a producer.
Wow.
Sorry, your second one?
No, my second one is really just that this, and I think Beks brought it up really well, but this whole episode brings up a lot of really interesting ontological questions that just, I feel, we'll probably be wrestling with the rest of the season. And I hope we explore, in season 2 a little bit more as well, with regard to just the scope of Morpheus's power, and then how his relationship with his creations change over time as he sort of tries to adapt his role and kind of come off of his high horse a bit, which I think is necessary for the health of his realm. So I'm just really looking forward to those pivots that all of the key players in the dream world sort of take.
Thanks, Ashley. Sean?
Okay, well, for my final thoughts, I usually try to go through the list of notes I've taken and, find some things that I haven't been able to bring up in the conversation. But I feel like I've brought up pretty much everything in conversation that I had originally wanted talk about. I guess just completing my, following my thought from the previous section, I also thought it was like a little extra cold of Morpheus, like when Lucian is like, she's basically like, come on, man, change is a thing. People change, things change, whatever. And he's like, all right, back to the library, bye,
Yeah.
Like, he just like, completely dismissed her. Like, this is someone who is not willing... Whatever the things that he doesn't want to confront, he just won't, and he won't have anyone around him talking about either. And this is it's a difficult self-destructive thing that's understandable because, if something makes you think about stuff you don't want to think about, then and you have. And you're a person with the power to just kind of make it go away, then you'd be inclined to do that. But over the course of the series, I imagine we're going to see what the consequences of that sort of myopic vision are, for someone even as powerful as Morpheus. So cool to see it and looking forward to how it plays out.
Thanks, Sean. So this episode, we really focused on quite a few things, but in particular, we all managed to find this theme of home. And obviously, this episode was called Playing House, and I don't think that wasn't done purposely, right? And that continues this theme from last week of family, now to home, and what home means, and how we dream, and when we dream, we're coming back home, and kind of how all that, ties in. This was also a really weird episode. I think we've seen some odd things maybe in the dreaming in previous episodes, but really walking through all of those people's dreams and or nightmares, and they're really starting to lean into this, which makes sense because if you made it this far, you're probably interested enough in the characters that even though if this is getting weirder, you're probably in it for that particular reason.
I'm wearing a Twin Peaks t-shirt right now, so I am right at home with weird TV, I'm like, I'm there for it.
Excellent. And there's just so much happening. I thought that they did a really great job of conveying this idea of a dream vortex, and everything is just sucking to her in the dreaming, in the waking. Everything is circling around Rose Walker and what is happening. And then lastly, this question of can we change, and and what that means for things that are created for one specific purpose, but maybe they want to do something different. I also, of course, want to say a special thank you to Beks for coming on to our podcast. Beks, thank you so much. And do you have anything that you'd like to plug?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you guys so much for having me. I'm just really impressed and inspired by everyone's thought process and just analysis of the different scenes and the knowledge you guys have. It's like really eye-opening to me, and I'm just glad that I could have a conversation with you guys. And I'm very elusive on the internet, but I have a Letterboxd account where you can read me only give things 5 stars or 4 stars because I am very bad at critiquing. But my Letterboxd username is BeksChecks, so you can find me there. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys again. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes. On that 5s and 4s, I will say that one podcast idea that Patrick and I had when we were trying to figure out things was, what if we did a short review podcast of just whatever is popular at that moment, but we only talked about the good part of it, no matter what. We would only find the good part of it and be like, hey, if you just want to hear 2 people talk about the good part of whatever is new and or Avatar, a podcast, doesn't matter. We're only going to talk about the good thing of it. So I appreciate that, Beks. I think it's a good thing to have, because I think a lot of people are looking for just like, oh, we just want some positivity. There's enough people out there being super critical. So thanks. I like it. Thanks for being here.
I also want to shout out our silent co-host, Beans, Ben's cat, which we just got to see on camera a second ago. So, not on the mic, but an important part of the show. Nevertheless, thank you, Beans. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Sandman Unlocked.
And remember, never trust the storyteller. Only trust the story.
Thanks for tuning in to The Sandman Unlocked, an Odd Conduit Media production. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sandman Unlocked. Join us on Discord as well. Thanks to our show producer, Patrick Childers, and to Lieutenant Headtrip for our theme and incidental music. If you'd like to support us directly, head over to our Patreon. You can follow Ashley on Twitter at DEEDEE_K and on Instagram and TikTok at Ashley Mowers. Find Sean on Twitter at Lon Dogson and find Headtrip everywhere at LT Headtrip. You can get all of this info and more in the show notes. Make sure to follow and subscribe and review us wherever you listen. Until next time, and remember, never trust the storyteller, only trust the story.
Odd Conduit Media.